Hi everyone, I'm really happy today, both as a podcast speaker and as a blogger for Reedsy and as a reader, because today Eliot Pepper's third book is launching. I was one of the lucky people who got an advanced review copy for it, and it is awesome. So Eliot, why don't you introduce yourself another time for our readers who don't know you yet, and talk a little bit about this trilogy that you've released?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much. It's been an honor to have you as an early reader along the way. So I really appreciate that. The trilogy, this book that launches today is called Uncommon Stock Exit Strategy, and it's the final book in the Uncommon series, which is a tech startup thriller trilogy that follows a college student who drops out to start a new software company and ends up getting sort of embroiled in an international financial conspiracy along the way. So people have sort of compared it to like John Grisham for tech, in the sense that it's a thriller that takes place in the startup world. And yeah, and then we've done a lot of fun stuff. So it's great to be back chatting with you.
Yeah, no, definitely. As a startup founder who might be a college dropout if I don't finish my last
I'm not responsible. I'm not responsible.
No, that might happen, but in any case, I really empathize with the character, and it is an awesome book for all startup founders out there. I'd say that it's better to read that than to read a nonfiction book on fundraising or growing your startup or whatever, because you get all these aspects in a fiction way, and fiction is so much better, simply. All right, I'll go a little bit for our readers into book marketing, and one thing that you told me is that what you really appreciate about your audience, about your book, is that it's small. It's kind of a niche, right? Why is that?
Well, it was very counterintuitive for me. So this is my third book launch, and we're actually speaking on the morning of the launch. So it is today, which is pretty cool. And so over the past year and a half or so, I've now launched the first, second, and third books in the trilogy. And at the beginning, that was the first book was my first book, and I feel like many first-time authors, you sort of have this dream in your head of it's going to be the next Harry Potter, right? Or like, the next like massive mega, like you don't want to admit it to yourself, but like secretly in the back of your head, you would love if there was mainstream appeal, right? And so often, and like I am very guilty of this myself, like when I started thinking about, okay, now the book is written, the creative process in the sense of the story itself is done and ready for publication, and now you have to put on the different hat of I'm no longer an artist, and for a moment I look at this as a business person in terms of now that this piece of artwork is becoming a product, how does that reach the marketplace and how do new readers find it? And when I started, I really, I tried to pitch like major news magazines to get covered. And I spent, it's hard to cover in this conversation simply because I devoted so much intellectual effort and energy to doing things that really didn't have much ROI, but that when you read blogs about like how books become bestsellers, that seems like that's what you should be doing. And so after the first book launched, I sort of got a feel for it, just like any other, like riding a bicycle. It's like you're like, oh, okay, this works and this doesn't. And I actually treated the second book launch very differently. I focused much more on, like, I did things like I went onto the first book's Amazon reviews and I left a comment. You don't get anybody's contact information, but on Amazon you can leave a comment underneath someone's review. And I left a comment saying, hey, I really liked your review. It means a lot to me, and especially as an indie author, this is what makes the difference. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective on the story. If you like, I'm sending out advanced copies for the next book, and if you'd like to receive one, send me an email. And I put my personal email there, right? And I was amazed. The conversion rate on reviewers of the first book who emailed me because they've read the comment, which I don't even know if Amazon even tells you that someone's commented on your review. But it was like over 70% of people responded and asked for the second book, which I was shocked by. Like, for anybody in like digital marketing, like a 70% conversion rate, even on a small population, is crazy.
Yeah.
right? So, that was sort of interesting. And so now that I'm in the midst of book 3, I'm trying to think back and say, like, well, what have I learned along the way? What has changed for how I treated this 3rd book launch versus the first and even the second? And the fundamental piece of it is that I've become much, much more interested in serving even if I only have even if I only have 3 readers, serving those readers and getting them, like, doing something that delights them, and spending a lot more intellectual effort on that than anything else. So I don't I don't do push marketing. I have no publicist. Like, everything is just like, what can I do for the people who already love the stories? And that's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? Because if I was because I was thinking for you and for folks maybe reading this interview or listening to this podcast, maybe they're an aspiring author and they haven't thought through step by step, like, well, how do I get there? Because now, even though I have a very small audience, I'm in the enviable position for some of having any audience at all.
Yeah.
And so this is how I approached it. And the things that have mattered the most, and amidst the 99% of hot air that I blew, on the marketing front, and that is, I put up a mailing list, which is what pretty much every author does, and I essentially seeded it with friends and family, so I was spamming them, and that was about 500 or 600 people at the end of the day for the first book. So it was also colleagues. I added a few people who I knew personally and who I knew read books like mine, so this would actually be up their alley rather than just a random person. And what happened, and what I was really happy about, is that list shrank. So as I released the first book, I sent out some stuff about it, hey, the book's out, here's some background details and stuff. And quite a number of people unsubscribed, which at first, whenever, especially when you're starting a new mailing list as an author, when someone unsubscribes, you always have this, like, nasty, like, butterflies in your stomach, like, oh man, like, that sucks. But I knew that was a good thing, because they honestly hadn't opted in, really. And so getting them to opt out and leaving that cohort of people behind that really cared about the stories was much more important. And I would way rather talk to a small group that's really into it. And then eventually, as people read the first book, a few people signed up. And I, in terms of very logistical detail, like, in the back and front of each book, I include a half page that explains that, like, I have a mailing list. If you want to hear about the next book, that's the best way to stay in touch, and that it's infrequent and personal and like that kind of stuff. Sure. And so I think a number of people found it through that. And then I would do a bunch of completely unscalable things. Actually, Paul Graham has a wonderful essay on this subject called "Do Things That Don't Scale." So if you're an entrepreneur and not just an author, or really it's a worthwhile essay for anybody to check out. But I found that to be really influential, as well as Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans essay. And so what I ended up doing is spending a ton of time interacting with people on the list, or people who had reached out to me with cold emails about the books, who were just excited about them because they randomly read them. And that resulted in some crazy things. Like, last fall, I heard from a guy in Ireland who was a startup founder and read the books and loved them. I'd never heard of him before, met him before. And so I responded and said, thank you, it's really cool to hear that. And then my wife and I visited Ireland last month, and we got beers with him, right? So, like, we met up in Dublin, like, he bought us Guinness. It was wonderful, and, like, we really got to connect in a really cool way. For this last book, Exit Strategy, it's about financial fraud. It's a thriller about financial fraud. And I got an email from one of the advanced readers who I've never met, who had only come in via the Amazon review comment thing. And he was like, look, I used to be the chief security officer at a financial services company. And, like, I just want to let you know that this was, like, chilling, because I saw corruption and sort of security breaches that like, honestly, were just as bad as happened in this book, and it felt completely real to me. And to me, that blew me away, right? I mean, especially because this is something I'm making up out of my own head. Like that was like shocking. So that's been really cool, deepening those relationships. And like that's something that if you're a mega best-selling author, you just don't have the freedom to do. You know, like I have a small enough mailing list that when I do my, like I'll have some kind of launch party for Exit Strategy next month probably, and I will probably invite my entire list, right? Which, you know, obviously there's not all of them are going to come, but still, like that's, you know, that's, if I had, you know, 100,000 person list, or if I had millions of readers, those are the kinds of things I'd never be able to do.
That'd be a party.
What's that?
That'd be a big party if you had 100.
It would, yeah, they would not fit in my house. So yeah, so that's sort of how I've approached it. And if you want, as I mentioned before, I brought up a spreadsheet here that I use to track my activity as I work up to book launch. If you want, I can walk you through the logistics of literally exactly what I do along the way.
Let's get granular and see how you went.
Okay, cool. So the first thing is I wrote the damn book, and like that's by far the most important part, right? So and like I don't look at that at all from the business perspective. Like I totally shut that away. That's pure just like creative art piece. And then editing and producing it, so there's a big piece there. And so this is the next step. This is sort of once I've got the story, now how do I think about what to do next? So what I did for this is I had a number of beta readers. So I had 16 people that I asked whether they would want to beta read the book, meaning they were the first readers that saw it, and hopefully they would give me some editorial feedback that I could use to sharpen the story. So I had 16 people who I asked to give me feedback, and I had I had 9 people who actually gave feedback, who gave substantive editorial feedback when I sent them the story. And this is as I'm doing editing with my actual editor, right? So they were involved from the very beginning. And so I broke that up into a couple of tranches where only 2 or 3 people would receive a draft of the book. Then I would do another revision. Then I would send it to the next 2 or 3 people. But the total number was about 9. Once we got the copy into good shape, so the story's looking good, it's gone through multiple revisions, both editorial and beta reading. We've done copy editing to get the language cleaner and make sure it looks good, and it's been designed and formatted into EPUB, MOBI, PDF, all the other formats that you might want to read a digital book. I then built a list of advanced review copy readers. So these readers are different. They're a group of people who are not, I'm not expecting them to give me in-depth editorial feedback. I'm hoping that they'll catch small errors along the way, and we had some big ones, like we had a duplicated chapter that was caught by the advanced review copy readers. But the goal for them is that they are hopefully fans of the stories, have read the first 2 books, and they are excited enough that they're going to read this book before it launches and hopefully leave an Amazon review, and maybe, as some people call this, a street team, right? Like share it on, you know, they're going to be the champions for the story. And so I reached out to 126 people individually, but this is really critical. I didn't just send them the advanced review copy and say, hey, please read this and leave a review. I sent them a very short email. It was literally like a 1-sentence email, and I just said, hey, my new book is coming out in 2 months, right? So this was 2 months ago. I said, my new book's coming out in 2 months. Would you like me to include you, in the advanced review copy list? Would you like me to send you an advanced review copy? And so my hope was that if people responded yes and opt in, they're going to have a much higher probability of actually doing it, right? Because for previous book launches, what I realized is I might have sent out a bunch of advanced review copies, but the conversion of people who actually read it and then left a review was smaller than I was expecting. So my hope was that this would be a filter for enthusiasm. so that people who were really excited and really wanted in would get it. And I actually had a number of people reach out to me via Twitter or email asking for an advanced review copy, so I added them to the list. But overall, out of those 126 people, I think we had, I'm eyeballing it now as I look at the spreadsheet, I think we probably had about between 60 and 70 people on the event who opted in to receive a digital advanced review copy. And some of those people, just their response might have been, hey, thanks, but I actually want to read it paperback, right? So, I'm not actually printing out galleys. I'm doing advanced review copies that are digital, so they're going to have to wait, right? So we had about, maybe a 60% conversion rate on people who then were, who wanted to receive those. And then I built a separate list of people who didn't want the advanced review copy and maybe hadn't even read the first 2 books, but who are good friends of mine and who are going to be excited about the launch because they're friends of mine, right? Rather than because they love the book. So I have a separate list of those people. And then I have a final list of what on my little spreadsheet I call influencers. And really, those are not really different than anyone else. It's just that they are people who have maybe a blog or a podcast or or some kind of platform or a large social media following. These are people that might be well known in their field and that have had some history with the books before. Either they told me they liked it, or I've been introduced to someone and the book was mentioned or something like that. And so I had a separate list of these folks who might have a larger audience to share their opinion with than you or I. And so I had a separate list of those, and I had 93 people on that list. And so for the advanced review copy readers, after they had opted in, I sent out an email and BCC'd all of them and said, here's the advanced review copy. I put it in Dropbox. I put instructions for how to load it on the different e-readers. And then a number of people responded saying, oh, I'm excited or whatever, right? And that was about a month ago, about a month before launch. And then I reached out individually to some people on the influencer list who I knew had read the first 2 books, and I said, hey, would you also like to be included? And then I would also send them a link to the same Dropbox. And for some folks on the influencer list, people who might have a blog or a podcast like you, I sent you an email saying, hey, it would be is there something that I could share that would be relevant and might resonate with your audience? That would help get the word out about the books, right? And obviously, Reedsy's audience are people like me. They're indie authors, and so we talked about it, and we were like, well, what could we talk about that's interesting? And it's like, well, maybe this whole process, right? How do you actually launch a book and the nitty-gritty of how to do it. And so there were a number of folks who responded positively, and sometimes people had suggestions that I would never have thought of myself. For example, a friend of mine who writes for tech.co, which is a a startup tech industry publication, asked whether Mara, the protagonist in the book, would write an op-ed for TechCo, right? So whether the fictional protagonist would write an op-ed for this publication as if she was real. And so that's actually going out later today, so I can send you a link for it. But there were a bunch of things like that were totally off the wall. Some of them were more obvious things, for example, I did a number of interviews on different podcasts and a number of written interviews for various publications that really addressed different topics based on how it was relevant to their audience. And then some of it was more random stuff. Like today, I posted the book on Product Hunt Books, so we'll see how that goes. So you can go on there and check it out and comment and ask me questions or something. So we lined up all of these activities. So then I built a separate list in the same spreadsheet that was the to-do list. It was like, okay, well, I have to let Mara know that she has to write this op-ed. I want to post it to Product Hunt. I have these different interviews scheduled, and then I would color code it so that I would shade things in when they were done. And so that's basically been how things worked. Now that we got up to launch week, the night before, or yesterday, so the day before launch day, I sent out a brief reminder to the whole advanced review copy list. That's 60 or 70 people that said, as promised, I'm just following up to remind you that the book will, the book's launching tomorrow. I'm really excited to hear what you think. First day reviews are really important, and all of our success.
Oh,
okay, Claire. It's my dog's birthday today too. Come here. Come here. Yeah. So I sent them a brief reminder just to let them know, and then today I'll send them one final just reminder, like, hey, so exciting, it's live. And then beyond that, I've put up Facebook posts on my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, and my author Facebook page, and Twitter, and things like that, which I think most people would think to do because they're pretty straightforward. But so here's actually one last final point: is that even on the Facebook posts, I've learned something about what makes for a good book launch Facebook post, which almost seems like goofy, right? Like, who cares? Like, it's a damn Facebook post. But what I found was that with the first book, my Facebook post was sort of like an announcement. It was like, because it feels important, right? You're like, oh, like, this is a big deal. And so, like, I only had a cover of the book and a link to Amazon, and sort of like, it was like fairly short. But this one, like for this book, like, because it's my dog's birthday, I took a picture of my dog. She's black and white. There's a black and white fireplace that she likes to sleep in. And so I put the 3 books like in front of her, so they're like on her little feet and stuff. And it's her birthday today. The book's launching today. So like that was one of the pictures I attached to the post. And like I took a funny picture of like me like looking at the book, like goofy things like that. And I made the post much more personal. And the reason why I did that, and the reason why my approach to content for all of this outreach has changed, is because initially, when I was launching the first book, I was thinking about it from my perspective. I was like, oh, okay, what would be great for me? It would be great for me if like everybody on Facebook decided to just love my book for the sake of it. It would be great for me if this journalist decided to write about my book in the New York Times. It would be great for me if all of these different things. And so when I pitched, when I would communicate with people, it was really selfish. It was, and it comes across as self-promotional too, right? Which isn't, you don't really want to be like handed a book by the author at a cocktail party. And that has really changed dramatically for me. So now I just try to think about, like, as a user of Facebook, what are the posts that I like the best, right? It's like posts that are personal, that are sort of funny, that are poignant, that like mean something to me from a friend. And that's actually different than the kind of post that gets me excited on Product Hunt or some kind of forum that's specific to a topic, right? And it's also different than what I would want to read in the op-ed of an industry magazine. And so really putting your audience first and thinking about your readers and your fans before thinking about yourself is the best way to sort of get perspective, even in the hailstorm of personal self-doubt and excitement that is a book launch.
Fantastic. And I think that if you have a small dedicated team and if you've gotten to know your readers the way you did it, then you feel much more comfortable posting a picture of yourself and of your dog and personal stuff like that on Facebook. And that's what makes the difference, because you build a real connection. Can we see your dog?
Yeah. Hold on. I'll go grab her.
Oh. Wow.
There you go, Claire. Yeah. She's a sheepadoodle. So she's a half Old English sheepdog, half standard poodle. And today is her first birthday.
Happy birthday! She's
Yeah.
I always wanted to have a dog on the Ritzy podcast.
Sorry, I didn't have the headphones.
I always wanted to have a dog on the Ritzy podcast. I'm happy now.
Okay. Yeah, now you're famous. Look at that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for those tips. I'll write a little transcript of the key points for the blog, and we'll stay in touch for future books. You're not going to stop there, right?
Nope. Already working on the next novel.
There you go. Excellent. All right.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I love Ritzy, so it's always fun to connect to your authors.
Thank you very much.